said heat wave, hose pipe bans, nighttime water bans. So I'm just going to stay on the beer to do my bit for the environment. Yeah, we all have to make sacrifices, and I'm willing to take one for the team.
I'll see you next week, Paul. I'll see you next week.
We'll see me next week. Galway Arts Festival alive and kicking. Chris, the biggest question that we have to kick this podcast off, you're currently wearing a Newcastle United kit.
Yes,
I'm curious to know what name is on the back of that kit. Because last week we discussed all the names on the back of all your kits slowly falling one by one. We need to know.
Bruno G, 39.
Bruno G. Still a Newcastle United player at the time of recording.
Yes,
I suppose. Alan Williamson, before we hit record, folks, listeners and viewers, a peek behind the curtain. Alan notched 20 minutes ago in the WhatsApp maintains. We're going to talk about a tweet from Luke Edwards shortly, but Alan maintains that Bruno is staying for another year. And as I say this, 3 hours ago, a tweet from Fabrizio Romano talking about Arsenal and celebrating on Morgan Rogers. So, Alan, I suppose the first question, you were saying this last week, but does Arsenal going for Morgan Rogers change their stance and pursuit of
I don't think that does. I still maintain that they will not go to the level that we want to release Bruno from this contract. I think Rogers will be their left winger as a replacement for Martinelli, because he is not
seeing he plays on the right wing for England and that one.
Lads, like, I obviously laugh at England losing. They got to the World Cup semi-final. They were fantastic. They blew up the last 10 minutes. To be honest with them, they were like losing the uphill. The manager made some absolutely dreadful decisions. I do not understand the book there.
Can we just hold on, just on that thought, right? And a lot of WhatsApp groups that we're all able to do with English Newcastle fans, and basically every one of them is like, well, nothing new here, because we've been watching Eddie Howe do this with Newcastle for a long time. Go ahead early and just sit and plant and go deep. I feel like Thomas Tuchel took it to the next level, bringing on like 7 defenders. It just felt a little bit familiar as a Newcastle.
The concept for Gordon was the worst substitution I've ever seen. That is, like, bar none, the worst substitution I've ever seen.
I put into the group there just last night. They were trying not to lose instead of trying to win, which
Newcastle have been doing for a long time.
Yeah, which is very unusual for them, because, to be perfectly honest with you, by the 55th, 60th minute, I thought, oh, here we go. Actually, they've got this sewn up. There's going to be a second goal there, and then I couldn't believe it. I thought he's put on everybody, so it was kind of like a 6-3, 6-4. It was so weird. It's kind of maybe 6 at the back. It's very bizarre. And they just gave Argentina, one of the best teams in the world, all the time in the world, pass the ball around. They're throwing this away. It's like they've been called it off. And I said as well, I smell a goal there. What will happen? And then I was like, there's a goal there. There's no way this was not extra time. England, like Messi had said after the match, looked like England had actually given up. When I got to they thought, even like, did you see Anderson when he made the changes there? His hands in the air, like, where am I supposed to go? Like, looking over at the bench going, where am I supposed to play? So that's a bizarre thing. It's kind of as if they just blew it away.
Even with all their centre halves on the pitch, not winning a challenge for Bruno. Martinez was through acres of space on the 18 yard box.
I think they got caught up in all the Dan Burn header clips of heading across the half line. I thought it was just giving everything. But he's going to have to remember when the best player in the world ever is on the pitch. He can deliver a ball. But anyway, we've digressed.
There has to be slight, like, Newcastle drip into this, which is kind of change the formation, but also, like I said to you, Paul, here's the sensationalism bit of it. We're only 2 weeks since season 3, so here we go. Tuchel is going to be fired, and Eddie Howe is going to leave Newcastle before the start of the season.
The FA have already said Tuchel is staying for 2026, so keep that in your plate and smoke.
Yeah, unfortunately not. And I say unfortunately not because I would not want those circumstances.
So just driving from Drogheda to Dublin, it's 6:30 in the morning on Monday.
We are on this inevitable
listening to the Irish Mags podcast, Newcastle fan.
Nothing really new here, and even based on today's event.
Good morning. It's about 14 degrees outside.
It's like Groundhog Day. all over again. We've had these peaks of Champions League football and some great signings, but we're right back in this circle again of players don't want to go to Newcastle, other clubs are getting in before us. And now, as of this evening, not too long before we record, more discussions on our financial status, particularly with UEFA and a tweet from Luke Edwards, which we'll come to very shortly. But it just doesn't feel great. Before we get to all that, I think the most important thing we should probably talk about, we've already touched on Bruno. We did a lot of that talk last week. It looks like there's no movement. Where I am with this, lads, is last week we were talking a lot. There was the one-man Zambi thing going around that obviously crashed and burned very, very quickly. And there's been nothing. I haven't really seen us properly linked with any player. Now, in some ways that's good. Like when we signed Sean Sturr from Ajax, and that just came out of nowhere. But it's unusual that we don't hear anything. And where I want to start, Alan, is I saw Fabrizio Romano retweet one of his own tweets, posts, whatever Elon Musk has his calling these days, from May this year. So we're talking almost 2 months ago. He retweeted his own tweets that said Tottenham are exploring and looking at Savinho from Manchester City. And the last line was Newcastle also monitoring. And my question, Alan, is are we by far and away the best club at monitoring players to the point where it might as well be the football manager database or working for Y Scouts, because we can give scout reports and give all the data because we've just been watching players for our
Two-sided answer to this. So we're great at monitoring, preparing bids, preparing to prepare a bid, preparing to exploring, yeah. But the other side of the coin is I don't think are letting anything out. Virgil Mulas, Virgil Manzambi, and they're now going, hang on a second. Once it gets out to the ether, we are fighting a losing battle. We need these deals signed, sealed, and delivered before anyone starts talking about them. But Sean Stewart, nobody knew about it until
How does it get out, Al?
Here's the question, right? Let's give an analogy here. Let's point to Colleen Rooney Gate, right? If any of you aren't familiar with the story, Wayne Rooney's wife, Colleen, she basically got to the point where personal stuff about her that she had never released to anyone, bar her inner circle, was getting released to the press and media, blah blah blah. So she planted a trap, and most people will know that by
it's Rebecca Vardy.
It was Rebecca Vardy, Jamie Vardy's wife, and she publicly called her out. So if we flip that to Newcastle United, bearing in mind now that the Sean Sturr being a very good example of this, do you think in that, and if things are suddenly lock and key and tight-lipped, there are links? Because links happen, obviously. The likes of Luke Edwards and Craig Keith Downey, they get it's not coming out anymore. I wonder have they pinpointed these sources and people, and if they're locking them out of those conversations. How broad was the circle in the first place? And great that it's narrow now, except we have nothing to talk about when it comes to
anyhow, Ross Wilson, because PIF on video, well, unless someone's talking about it, I'll see people coming up and talking about it.
That's usually what you do, Chrisio, when you're taking a week off from the podcast. We figure you're hiding under a table or something. You're not part of it.
I just want to know how God's name got on everything.
I'll tell you exactly how, right? The Munoz one was the agent went, right, you have this agreed, and you're getting offered this. I am going to now tell you that every single company I can get my fucking hands on and see how much more I can be offered. And anyone else will give me a better deal. The Manzambi deal got into the ether because Freiburg went, okay, he's going to leave. It's pretty much a done deal that Newcastle haven't agreed. I'm now going to say, Mr. Romano, here's €10,000. Tweet 400 times that Newcastle are moving forward, Newcastle are moving forward, Newcastle are moving forward. Get people talking. So other clubs, there was talks of Villa
close enough inner circles, blah blah blah. If we're saying a lot of the leagues that come up with players we're targeting are externals, let's call them agents, and the clubs that these players play for, is the only way not to get the information leaked, not actually talk to the club or the agent. Therefore, we're back to monitoring stage. So, how can we, it's a real catch-22 because this is the market we live in, right? As soon as Newcastle are entering conversations, then of course, and we're not the only ones this is going to happen to, this is going to be every club. But it's particularly noticeable for us because we're easily beatable by a lot of other clubs. And even an example for me, like Bournemouth during the week were linked with Antonio Silva of Benfica. And for a second I was like, ridiculous, right? And then I thought, well, actually, wait. Like, of course, Newcastle, we were linked with them probably for 3 years now. We've been monitoring him for 3 years. We've seen him grow from a child to an adult at this point. Probably nobody has for reference. But in reality, Bournemouth probably could beat us to Silva if we both went in with the same fee and the same wages. He probably won Bournemouth. Why? Because they have European football. And he's watched Zabarni go to PSG and he's watched Heisen go to Real Madrid. This is the sad, harsh reality where we are. Probably we're going to moan about for the next half an hour, but I just don't know how we got here. And a lot of it would be PSR and financial restrictions. But we've also just made enormous balls out in terms of being really poor in terms of the transfer market. And Alan, I know you want to talk about the timing of selling players and the timing of transfers and when we're making moves both in and out. And ultimately this now looks like it's going to cost us on top of these UEFA sanctions and fines and transfer impact. But it's just, I don't even have a question. How the hell did we get here from 2 Champions League campaigns in 4 years to now we're probably at the bottom of the mid-table barrel, and a lot of other clubs have surpassed us when we looked to be miles ahead of a lot.
We should have sold Mickey at the end of that purple patch. We should have sold Murphy at the end of that purple patch. We should have sold Joe Linton at the end of last season, if not the season before. We should have sold Trippier when Bayern Munich came in with £14 million from him. We're holding on to players 1, 2, sometimes 3 seasons too long. It's a loyalty thing, yes, 100%. I understand as a coach and this. If you get that 14 million or reinvest, you get someone else in, you're not relying on Pino Livermento, because legs made of paper mache. They inevitably break down 3 times a season and then we're still not injured. It's the loyalty of Eddie, let's be honest about it, 2 players and wanting to keep, like, every single club sells players every single year. Very rarely see the exact same 26-man squad 2025 going into 2026. Newcastle did for 3 years. We went 4 windows without signing it. It's not sustainable. You have to freshen up the squad. And I was listening to another podcast earlier, and it was actually about how many assistant managers Fergie went through from Man United, and I didn't actually realise until they started reading. He had like 6 or 7 different assistant managers in 20 years. Purely because and not that they were being sacked and being thrown out. He thought, okay, you've got us to this point. We're freshen up, bring someone else in, and inevitably the assistant manager would go on to become a manager somewhere else. Like Carlos Quiroz was their assistant manager for 5 or 6 years.
Are you never holding on to Tindall? He's never holding on to Tindall.
No, I think we need to freshen everything.
Right, everything.
We're too static. We're living in the past and we continue.
Here's where we are. We did talk about this last year, right? We're going to start here because we're going to have to, because it has been put in the group again. Slightly disappointing, and I'll echo off your point, right? This is right. Football now is modern business operation, right? It is about money in and out, about acquisition and investment, right? Newcastle were neither of those things when PI are gone. Neither of any kind of idea of a business model whatsoever. They've made a couple of poor appointments because they're basically remotely managing the club. from different parts of the world, whether it's Saudi Arabia, New York, or wherever it is. There's nobody on the ground, right? So they did have people on the ground that didn't work out. Specifically around the football operations part, it didn't work out. Okay, commercially, again, they got, what's the man's name, the commercial guy that left? He did do okay, then he left. He was with Arsenal.
Like, yeah, he's done.
Yeah, so he did okay, but he's gone, right? So a lot of the, if you look into the company, like the players who work in the company, because this is what it is. Newcastle are now transitioning to becoming a modern football company, not a football club. What I mean by that is that we're all here talking about tactics, formations, getting new players in, who's going to be the goalkeeper. None of that, and I mean none of that, is being discussed at certain levels within Newcastle United. It's all about commercial revenue, how we can get around this, what are we going to have in 2027, 28, how can we get investors to come in and help us build the stadium. Money, investments, acquisitions. You're going to think, well, hang on, players or acquisitions? Yeah. And what I'm saying is that at the present moment, Newcastle really aren't doing what we were thinking they were going to be doing in phase 2. Yes, based off what Al said, they should have sold more. They just wanted to hold on to their Premier League, the Premier League status. And what's happened now is that the reason why we haven't gone out and already bought 6 to 7 to 8 players already is because they're still trying to finance. Like, not only did Isaac shoot a hole in the project in the bottom of the barrel to let the water out, but the performances last year, when players were kind of halfway giving up and going to leave, that has really blown the arse out of that barrel. So PIF now are scrambling to get more investors in to continue the revenue to grow. Because, and I think the football bit is that Ross William, Eddie Howe, Andy Howe, that's kind of like, if they had a board meeting, it would probably be about 15% of the conversation. And this is the problem, because we're talking about that 10-15% like it's the be all and end all. The truth of the matter is, the Newcastle fans need to realise that if the club is to have any kind of future whatsoever, we need to focus a lot more on the 85% of what's going on, which has nothing to do with buying footballers, and really nothing to do other than getting 16th or 17th and staying in the Premier League. That's sad, that's the truth.
I think like Alan has probably hit it fairly well in the head in terms of like, we've talked about this so many times, as is it wrong, like, notoriously bad at selling players, right?
Joe,
Forget about the last 12 months. If you go back before Isaac, our record sale was still Andy Carroll.
yeah.
Can anyone tell me what year that was? Like
2011,
12, 13, like that. You're talking a hell of a long time ago, right? And after that, Alan St. Maximin for not a whole lot of cash for many reasons.
20 million, yeah.
And while you're chatting there, I mean, because Christian, your points are valid. Like we want to be this lead force. We want to drive up revenue. Our revenue is shocking. It is what it is in terms of the club, the location. Trying to drive up revenues through various means, but ultimately, selling a player is the fastest way to make money, quick, particularly in terms of what it looks like in the books. And as we were discussing there, lads, I'm just looking at Aston Villa, and I mean, you can never compare two things and call them like for like, but I'm just looking back on 10 years of Aston Villa outgoings, and you can actually see on paper how they've realised and how they've just made decisions which initially would drive fans insane.
Monday morning traffic.
Bad decisions, but look where they are now as a club. So if you go back to like 16-17 season, they sold Idrissa Gueye, the highest departure that year, to Everton for $8.5 million. I forgot he was even there. Right. The following season was Jordan Vertu to Fiorentina for €7 million. That was 17-18. In 18-19, it was Jordan Amavi to Marseille for 10 million, right? So you're looking at really minimal sales, right? The following season, they didn't sell anyone. I think they sold one guy for 3 million. The following season, 2021, Scott Hogan to Birmingham, right? Remember Scott Hogan? Fucking Irish, randomly.
Kind of.
Now, bear in mind, the same season they bought Ollie Watkins, but anyway, we'll come back. Then Jack Grealish goes to Man City in the 21-22 season for €117.5 million. Following season, Carney Chukwuemeka leaves to Chelsea for 20 million. Matt Targett goes to Newcastle for almost 20 million. And then it kicks off. Cameron Archer, Sheffield United, 20 million. John Duran, Al Nasser 77 million. Same season Moussa Diaby, Al Ittihad 60 million. Same season Douglas Luiz, Juventus 51.5 million. Same season Jadon Philogene, Ipswich 23.7 million. Following season Jacob Ramsey, Newcastle 45 million. And now Yuri Tielemans, Man United 41 million. Daniel Malin, Roma 25 million. Luca Dean is going to PSG. And like you can see, they've suddenly gone from doing fuck all to going right. This actually pays dividends financially. I'm sure a lot of those players who didn't really want to sell, maybe John Duran being the exception because he's a bit of a mad bastard. I didn't buy him now.
Yeah, head the ball.
But the Jack Grealish one was a bit of an anomaly. We just said once again we're late to the party in what those sales mean. Because consistently, lads, and arguably more than us, we were lucky to get into the Champions League, particularly last season, but Aston Villa are competing at the top table now. And they're still not out of the gap, like financially and wages and all that, but I reckon they're in a far better position than us. And they're not spending like crazy. It just means that their business model is functioning very, I would say, more healthily now. They've had some pain to get there. But now they're in a position where, we know who we're going to sell. We know who we're going to buy because we know who we're going to sell. Whereas we're going to go and shit, we need to sell and we don't know where we're going to buy. And they're two very different things.
We've done it ours about 2 ways, essentially.
Well, it wouldn't be like this.
No, it wouldn't be like this, right? We've gone into it, with our arse ended up essentially in our elbows out. Phase 1 was brilliant. Eddie was doing great. We've got a couple of good players in. We spent some money. We got Champions League. We won a cup. Hooray! It's like all the trajectory going that way. And now, again, it's just we got splat into a wall. It should actually, the phase 2 that's happening now really is what should have been happening in phase 1. Buy a couple of good players, stay up, get a good season under you, sell. Get some players in, start to build up, get those Sean Sturs and kind of get them in and build them up. But now we're doing it, they've kind of like put the brakes on, and I think it's been quite shocking for everybody from Newcastle. They put the brakes on. Like we've only bought.
Well, I think, and Alan, I don't know if you agree with me, Alan, but I think it's because we peaked too early.
Yes,
we went from Eddie Howe coming in. We managed to bring in Trippier and Bruno and Dan Burn and the relegation. We finished respectively, 11th in that first season, 12th, and then the following season we're in the Champions League. And suddenly we were like, we're a Champions League club, and we have to operate as one. And it's kind of understandable when you think, oh shit, we're not equipped for this, we need to bring out players. And we obviously overshot that in the following season. Things obviously dipped off, but we still continued to act and think like we were up at that top table when we really weren't. And then 4 transfer windows in a row, we were like, oh crap, we can't spend now, and now we have to sell Elliot Anderson. Well, we're at the final and could be in the World Cup team of the tournament if they'd still it was almost like we got 2 weeks because we achieved so much in such a short space of time, and credit to Eddie Howe and everyone for doing that. We got far too carried away, and it was the long-term disappeared because it was all the here now. I'm not blaming anyone specifically for it. We're paying a hefty price now to have to reap the opposite of rewards, to pay for those sins almost, and it's costing us a hell of a lot now because not only have we underperformed and we weren't able to spend, and therefore we've dipped off. We've dropped off, like we've into a chasm like of underperformance to the point where we're going to struggle to attract anyone of the caliber that we had gotten used to signing with Isak, Bruno, Tonali, Gordon. I just can't see those players wanting to come to us, and it is another conversation I want to have, but let's not break the back wages wise, because I still feel like we're being forwarded. But Alan, like, am I just so depressed that I'm like we're miles off? Am I over exaggerating it, or is this us paying for the sins of the previous years of overachievement?
Field's gone up.
Overspending and overexcitement.
We pay
182 for diesel, 172.
So
I would argue definitely not anymore, right? But Isak, Gordon, Nali.
Oh yeah,
surely.
Yes, I'd imagine it has. But as of last season, we were paying the 8th highest amount of wages. So any higher than finishing 8th for us was an overachievement. That's the be all and end all. What you're paying is what you get back, really, in the heel and hunt usually. Finishing 5th or 4th the first year, we had a Conference League side with a Champions League spine. Hope had a great year. Dortmund had a fantastic year. Bruno was immense. Isaac was insane. They dragged us to the Champions League. We overachieved. We did the X's with essentially a Europa League side. Pumped money into it. Fell flat in our face. Not in Europe then. And in that again. Massive outlay on wages, massive outlay on players. It just didn't work. And we had to try and reap the rewards of it, and it didn't. What realistically, I don't say the club wanted this to happen, but I think the club expected
Got here.
someone to come in and offer 100 million.
183 for Diesel, 184 for Diesel, 176 for Pedro.
The clause was activated. Nobody did. That meant there was no sale. That meant there was no ability to reinvest in the squad. We could have sold Longstaff for 12 million. What are you going to get with that? The club wanted it. The club didn't want it to happen. The club anticipated it happening. It didn't happen. And it didn't backfire. It's just Bruno has been amazing for us. But in an ideal world, I do think the club said to Bruno when he was bought to come in, play for 3 or 4 years. We will sell him for a massive profit for ourselves to PSG or Real Madrid, Manchester City and Arsenal. It didn't happen, and now we've had to keep flogging a dead horse. He's now looking at us go, I was told I'd either be challenging for titles here or whatever's or I'd be allowed to leave. It hasn't happened. I think it's in the line of the takeover. We're essentially going back a year after we got Champions League the first time. That's what we're back to. It's like we walked back in time. We've had to totally reset the squad. And we're now having to, like, we need to basically reset everything. There can be no more mistakes. We cannot afford to drop under 55 and a miss it and not work. We cannot afford to drop 55 million on the leg and not work. Those players need to hit the ground this year. Otherwise, we're up shit's creek without help.
It's because they won't have sale value. They won't have sales value. We can't really sell them.
Wissa has no resale value. He's 29 going on 30. He is gonna be a dead weight around our neck for at least 10 more years.
Just think this might come in with 20 million or 25 million actually.
Maybe, but hopefully. We have to have his value. We have to work his value off the books. We cannot sell any of them players.
Well, I think you're right to be pessimistic. I think you're right to be down. I think you're right to be worried. I think all Newcastle fans are right to be worried. Again, we do need to be as realistic as possible on the podcast for the benefit of everybody listening and for our own sanity that it's the 16th of July. There is, what, is it about 6 weeks left? Maybe 7 weeks of the transfer window. I believe it's the 4th of September. So is it? We've got about 6 weeks or so left. I've got to believe, and I mean this genuinely, I've genuinely got to believe that there's at least 4 more senior players coming in, or at least first team players. I know we discussed it last week, Al, but it's just that I genuinely feel there has to be at least 4 players that come into the squad that do have a chance of playing on the first day of the season. I think Hope goes out. I think a new goalkeeper comes in. I think that we get a right back, left back in. I think that we get another midfielder after missing and Savvy. And I think that we get another attacking player in. I don't know whether it's a winger or a striker or whatever it is. But again, that's 4-ish. We get 4 players. I don't know how much that's going to cost. And I think you're right, Alice. Well, I do think Bruno stays for 1 more year. I think he goes to Real Madrid. Or he goes to Real Madrid now to replace Candidate.
If they offer £90 million, I would happily see him go to Real Madrid this year rather than see him go next year for 60.
I'd sell him for 70.
Yeah, I'd also agree with that. I'd happily ship him off outside the Premier League to anyone else. Happy pat on the back, thanks very much for Bruno. You have been an absolute servant for us. He does everything he said you would do. You're a legend. Do not go back to the Premier League.
Right, okay, So we're half an hour in, and this has been very tough listening, listeners. If you're still here, though, you know why we are where we are. But before we take a quick break, my last question here is: I'm pretty sure you're telling me to stay positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you for why I'm not so positive. And look, Europe doesn't mean everything, right? And we've seen that before. However, Sandro Tonali's just left us to go to a club that finished far below us last season and therefore not next season, right? If you flip that around, if we're competing for players, and I just mentioned Antonio Silva willing to play, Monitor in Europe, Miller in Europe, and United in Europe, we had Champions League and Sesko still went to Manchester United, as did Brighton.
They're Man United.
They're Man United, granted, right? So what swings Man United, bar the reputation, which was kind of in the bin, it's money, right? So if a player goes to Man United or Newcastle last summer, it's not because he wants European football, it's because it's Man United, the reputation, the money 100% is the majority share of the decision pie, and also the long-term project. Our long-term project is somewhat very long. It's not a short-term, medium-term project. It's
Not
no longer
2030.
No, and it's no longer, hey, Bruno signed for us from Lyon back in the day because we were challenging in 2, 3, 4 years because we did, fair play to us, we did. That is, by all accounts, the optics would show, would suggest that's not very realistic. So now we're competing with a Champions League Man United, a Champions League Aston Villa, a Europa League Bournemouth, and dare I say it, a Europa League Sunderland, and a Conference League Brighton. So if we're not able to, if we just put it down on paper in terms of a player has a choice, what do we have that gives us the edge? The only thing we can fall back on is money. And what we'll probably come back and talk about after the break is now today we're hearing that money may also be an issue. I very much don't think so. I think we need to have players coming and going and have transactions on the books. I don't think it means we need to sell them for buy. But I think that if we're to sign players to get us to that level, bring us back to anywhere close to the level, we're going to need to be able to offer some kind of competitive edge. And as far as I can see right now, the economy has been, and it's depressing, but that's how football works. We've seen that repeatedly over these last few seasons. So on that cheerful note, let's take a quick break.
Yeah, wow, I need a drink. Jesus.
I promise we will get a bit more cheerful. I do want to talk about that, the whole idea of luring players in, because there are names, listeners, viewers, and folks that we are linked with, and it's time we talk about some of those names and see where we are, as well as any of the other rumors in terms of outgoings, and one that surprised me this week as well. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Irish Mags show. That was a tough 34 minutes, so congratulations, listeners, if you're still with us. We aren't normally this miserable in the press, but I think it's balanced with logic and
fan base numbers, global reach, shirt sales.
Can I just interrupt? The only thing we're ahead of all the other clubs on is most sporting directors in seasons. Because we're just collecting them.
And we've more Gregs near the stadium than the other club.
And more pubs, right? Which is great, right? It's like we're the Ireland of the Premier League. The fans are great, but the team, are questionable, right? But like it's painful. It's absolutely painful. Luke Edwards gives me like a reoccurrence of Bell's policy in my face. He annoys me to death because he's just said exactly what we all know. You need to sell some players, to buy some players for the foreseeable future. He might as well have just wrote etc. Blah blah blah. He's a moron. I don't listen to him, anybody, or don't do anything he says. He's a moron. And
that's us never asking Luke Edwards to come on the Irish Night Show.
well, he can come on. He can put me on mute. Honestly, I just think it's just again, he works for the Telegraph. He has to write something. He was tasked with writing something about Newcastle, 4 times a week. He has to write something, and he's done it again this time, where he's basically wrote a paragraph that says nothing and doesn't give us any information, and there's nothing verifiable about it, and he's just kind of wrote it in a clever way that doesn't make it sound. So just to sell, throw out a tweet, and so I just wouldn't be buying into that too much. Al, you already said it yourself. You don't need to work for the Telegraph to say this. You need to spawn old blogs to buy some new saplings to grow into big trees. It's very straightforward. Now, Al, you didn't say it like that. I am. But Willett has to go. Paul has to go. Murphy has to go. I read today that our good friend
Just on that, I am sick to death. Willem should be sold. To who? Murphy should be sold. Yeah,
Crystal Palace.
You can't force clubs to buy these players. Imagine Man United bringing up us and going, here, we have Lindelof, 30 million. We'd laugh about the shop. Like, nobody wants these shite bags at the end of the day. Pope is an Ipswich, Coventry, Hull level goalkeeper. Willock doesn't get into the Palace side. Palace were in Europe last year. Like, he doesn't add anything to their squad. They have Adam Wharton sitting in the midfield, who walks into our midfield at the minute. It's not Football Manager.
No.
Nobody wants these players.
That goes back to the timing, right? There was hindsight is everything. Look back. There was a point where they were probably a lot more sellable for obvious reasons as well as questionable reasons. Anyhow, didn't want to lose them. Why? Because there was no indication of how it was. So you can kind of get why we are where we are, but equally got us at some point cut to the chase. And like we said, teams like us will have done it to their possible detriment. Like when they sold John Durrell. Like, did they replace him? It was just like Ali Watkins, and they loaned in Daniel Ballon.
So does it boil down to that? They just have a better manager.
No, they don't.
He was the manager we wanted originally, but let's not go there.
He's not a better manager. He's done better in the last season, but up until last season, Eddie Howe done better. So there's no, it's tit for tat really. The other thing you said about Lee Ryder, he broke the as a mandatory transfer to the point where
Lee Ryder or Luke Edwards? I'm getting lost.
Oh, sorry, Edwards in the Telegraph, he broke that. You're mixing the two. But he was like, to the point where Romano turned around and tweeted, the Telegraph broke it, not the actual wire that broke it. Like, it's, he has an instinct. Yeah, like, it's, there's bits and bobs and all, like, it is what it is.
I'll offer an official apology to Luke Edwards and his family and the Telegraph. Yeah, look, you're not a
and Lee Ryder all around.
And Lee Ryder, yeah.
I didn't say anything about Lee Ryder. Lee Ryder's a nice
he got dragged into it. Right, so let's bring it back to a question I have then. I want to talk about some of the newest names that we've linked.
Right.
Taking into account what we know. So what do we know? We sold Alexander Isak last season for 120 million, 125 million, whatever it was. We sold Anthony Gordon for 80 odd million. We sold Sanders Nally for nearly 100 million. those wages are now off the books. Other players have left who were on relatively high wages.